So we're here today all the way from Golden to talk to you about boosting your business by managing your brand in a very disciplined way and also having a plan for when stuff happens, negative stuff, when so that you can propel your business forward in a way that is consistent, connecting with your audience, connecting with the community, engaging with your employees, and spreading the word about your positive social impact. So that's all kind of what we're laddering up to today. So I'm Stacey Stevens. I'm 25 years in the communication field. Currently, I'm working mostly in the sector of sustainable agriculture. I guess I should admit for this crowd, most of my experience is in big food and big agriculture. I've worked for companies like Coca-Cola and Nestle and DSM Animal Nutrition. So a lot of my experience is in the big corporate world, but a lot of the same principles and practices and research apply. And what's pretty cool about sustainable agriculture these days is that the biggest corporate entities are realizing that agriculture, instead of being a net emitter, can be a net carbon, negative impact on the environment. If you're a large farmer and you're paying attention to soil health and methane reducing practices for the cows that you feed and raise, there's a huge, positive trend going toward that. So a lot of my experience is in the dairy industry specifically. I worked with the FDA, the USDA, Department of Homeland Security before it even existed, on major national and international plans to prepare the U.S. dairy sector for a crisis event of huge magnitude that would interrupt the supply chain and possibly, be either an agritourism event or animal disease event or food safety event that would have large implications. So a lot of these kind of best practices are born out of those experiences. Thankfully, as the U.S. dairy industry, I'm not their representative anymore, but has not had a crisis of that magnitude. But a lot of it is due to the thoughtful preparation and planning of industry sectors in partnership with government. So we're here to talk to you a little bit about that. My co-presenter, Georgina, is on the proactive side of brand management and marketing. And we each are independent business people in Golden, Colorado now. We met through Golden Women in Business, a networking group, and have not been colleagues, but it feels like we've been colleagues for the past year because we meet every month and compare notes and share strategies and refer business. So that's why we're here together today. And Georgina is actually going to kick off our agenda talking about the proactive side, building your business by building your brand. Working at that as another part of your day. And I will be talking the crisis management side, which is, it could be a negative headline that you need to address right away, or it could be something more seismic in the industry disrupting the kinds of scenarios that I talked about with dairy. So we'll talk about both sides of the coin today. And we want questions, Zoom people. We want your questions. We will be watching the chat.
So just a word or two about me before kind of kicking off my part. So I started my career in a similar place to Stacey in public relations and kind of communications. Since then, I now actually work for myself and I help small and medium-sized businesses set their brand and marketing strategy and help them grow. So we thought this would be a really fun collaboration to do as a presentation, because everything that I'm going to be talking about in terms of establishing a strong brand, it basically builds up the resilience for when something goes wrong. If something goes wrong, then if you've done the work to build a brand, you have something to fall back on because you've built up trust with your audience. Kicking this off, there are kind of two parts to having a brand in the world in a positive, proactive way. Part one is building that brand, and part two is kind of bringing it out into the world. So I'll go into both. Now, I will be going through this content quite fast because we don't have a lot of time today, and going through this process, just this part alone, building the foundations of a brand, can take months with a client and lots of money and time. So this is the kind of a whistle stop. But what I want to kind of leave you with is why these bits matter, because often branding seems as like it's a nice to have, and we have a nice logo and we have some pretty colors, but it's actually all a business function. So I'm going to start off by giving a bit of a hot take. What the most important thing about your brand is your audience. Kind of who you are is important too, but who your audience is almost more important, because how you put yourself out in the world, how you construct your brand depends on who you're talking to. At the end of the day, whether you're a company selling something, a non-profit with members, you're trying to fundraise, a government entity with stakeholders, you have someone that you're trying to make do something, and that is your audience. Thank you. I don't know what you did.
Check in the chat in case we have questions coming in.
We'll get that. So before you do anything else, a really valuable exercise is just to think about who that audience is in a very concrete way. And there are different ways of doing this. You may have heard of customer avatars, audience personas. Those are tools. Feel free to Google that, what that means. But it's basically ways of thinking about your client and what they want from you, what they need from you, what they want to hear from you, because that is then going to impact what you say to them. So the next part of that, and this is where I kind of want to start with the audience piece, is because when you work out your brand identity, you can think of it as your company's personality, who they are. You as an individual, you have your personality, you have what people think of you, you have your reputation, and that is what your brand is for your company. It's how you are in the world, and it touches everything from how your sales team acts to your logo to what your building looks like. It's kind of all encompassing. So there are some parts, and I'm just pointing at the top 3 bits here for people on the screen, in the computer, that you can kind of think about on your own to start off with. So the most important thing when it comes to your brand is really thinking about your why you are in this, what you're trying to achieve. And that can be called your purpose, your mission. You may have heard of mission statements. And that is the essence of why you get up in the morning and do what you do. And that's on one level, particularly if you're a business, it's like, I want to sell and make money and have a life. But also, what is the deeper purpose that you're trying to fulfill? Are you trying to bring people peace of mind? Are you trying to help them through something? Are you trying to inspire them? There can be lots of different things that you're trying to do that goes a little bit deeper than just selling your service. What is the big thing that they get from you that you love to give them? Your vision is a really useful tool to think about. It's if you did this every day for the rest of time, how would you change the world? What are you aiming for? And this is helpful for brands because it gives them a North Star to aim for. They can kind of be thinking, okay, well, we might not achieve it, but for example, Oxfam, its vision statement is to eradicate global poverty. Now, good luck to them, because that's a big, chunky one, but at least they know what they're trying to do. And so it's that kind of thing. And once you know that, it keeps you on a path. And then your values. These are what behaviors you expect from yourself, from your team members, and what's kind of a deal breaker. And this is something that should be sort of inculcated within your company so that everybody understands what's expected from them. And this is something that is important when it comes to kind of the crisis times, because if you have determined what your values are and you've expressed them and you're true to them, when you mess up, it's easier to go, I'm sorry, we messed up, we didn't match up to our values, and we'll do better next time. And it's easier to regain trust if people are clear on what your values are and can see you've been following them. So all of these things are basically kind of direction setting. It's you articulating to yourself what you're trying to achieve and giving yourself a path to do it. And those are the bits that you can kind of do by yourself. But then the other parts of getting out into the world, those are also determined by your audience. So your personality and tone of voice. So by that, I mean everything you put in your social media, how you write a blog, what wording you would put on an advert, that's all personality and tone of voice. And that needs to be both true to you and appealing to your audience. So what I mean by that is it needs to be appropriate. So Burger King, for example, they have a very sarcastic tone of voice on social media. Like they roast other burger joints and they have a great time doing it. And that's fine because they are a food product that's loved by lots of people. But if you are in a more delicate situation, say you're helping people through a difficult time in a hospital, maybe don't put like sarcastic comments on your Twitter. It's that kind of thing. Equally, your name and your logo. Often companies, just through necessity, they need a name to register with the Secretary of State and they want a logo so that they can start doing their business. That's fine. We've all been there, done that. But really, kind of the best practice is that name and that logo should, again, be informed with what your audience wants from you. If you're a yoga studio, and you're all about calm and zen, maybe don't make your logo bright green and spiky. Things like that. So it's true to you, but also what your audience expects. An extension of that, the visual brand, the visual expression of your identity, the color palette you use, the graphics you use, what photos you choose, that all says a lot about you. And that needs to be thought through in terms of both your brand and also what your audience wants. Are you aiming at a diverse audience? In which case, you should have some visual diversity in your photos. What demographic is your audience? Are they mainly older women? In which case, don't put 20-year-olds on your website. So think carefully. All of this is to create an impression of cohesion. And then kind of the final part, and I'll go into a bit more in the next slide, is your positioning and your messaging. So it's how you stand out in the marketplace and what you want to tell people about yourself. So before I move on, just because we've got a nice intimate group today, does anybody have any specific questions about any of this? Yeah.
For personality and tone of voice, how is the best way to combine this with speed to result in using AI or ChatGPT to create some content?
Great question. So just to repeat the question, how with personality and tone of voice, how can you use that with AI and things like ChatGPT to create content? And that's actually an area that I really enjoy playing with, because you can say to ChatGPT, rewrite this paragraph in a formal tone intended for this audience. So you have a piece of text and you want to make it really specific in tone. You can tell ChatGPT what you want, and then you can go, actually add a little bit of humor to it. And if you don't like that, you can specify further. So the better you know your own tone of voice as a brand, ChatGPT will react. Is that helpful?
I think it's hard when you're trying to also be authentic, but we're also trying to move quickly.
Yeah.
Those two things sometimes are in conflict with each other.
Absolutely. But that's where doing the foundational work, just taking a little bit of time to do that and set your tone of voice is really important, because when you want to be fast after that, you've got it. You don't have to be rethinking it the whole time. So if this is something that you and your team encounter, I would encourage you just to take maybe a half hour and sit down and go, okay, let's nail this so that everybody knows what the tone of voice is. And there are some exercises. I'd be happy to share them with you. I've got them on my website, just in terms of like how casual you want it, how whether it's going to be respectful. Like there's some work you can do just to help you pin that down for yourself and articulate it. And once you've got that, those descriptive words is what you can plug into ChatGPT and it will react to them. This is the bit that I really love when it comes to the branding. It's helping you stand out and identify what makes you different to all of your competitors, because you can do the mission, vision, values work and be really comfortable that you know who you are and like and like that. And then you can think about your audience. But if you don't bring those together, then why should your audience choose you over your competitors? And again, this is all about making who you are more robust so that when something bad does happen, so they know what makes you special and why you're different to every other competitor who's also mucking up. And so I like this Venn diagram because usually in a Venn diagram, you want to be right in the heart of the Venn diagram. You want to be in that crossover of 3 bits. But in this instance, you really don't. Because what you want is you want to express what makes you really special, what you want to say about yourself. Those are the, like, you think, this is what really matters. This is what I want to tell to the world. Great. But that only matters insofar as your audience actually cares about it. Because if you go out there and say, hey, we have blue phones, and your audience is like, I don't care if you have blue phones. Are they fast? Maybe don't make a big deal about the blue phones. So that's kind of the first piece. And then the second piece, the kind of, and this is the tricky one for many companies, is you do not want to intersect with what your competitors do well or what they're saying as well. Because if you end up in this middle, you're just going to be the same as everybody else. And sometimes we do have to put stuff out there that's just like, yeah, we can do that too. But we also do this. So you want to really think about whenever you're doing kind of an exercise to be like, okay, what makes us special? Test it against what everybody else is doing. And if everybody else is saying it, then it's not special. So these are the parts that will really help you stand out from the crowd, give you a robust identity, and one that your audience will actually enjoy. Now, I'm going to give you a case study in a minute, but does anybody have any questions about this bit? So this part is about bringing your brand out into the world. So you've done all the foundational work, and it will, believe me, doing that foundational work will make you more agile and able to move faster afterwards, because it will mean you don't have to decide on the fly what your tone of voice is or redo it 3 times. And it'll give you something to aim for. So the big thing about building trust in the real world is consistency. And it's not rocket science, but it is long and painful. But it's just basically be who you say you are. Do what you say you do. Go out there, say, this is who we are, and then be it. And it is surprisingly hard for lots of companies to do that. Sometimes that is because they don't know who they really are, and so they're kind of wibbling the whole time. That's a technical term. And sometimes it's because they go out there and they say things that aren't actually who they are, and therefore it is inauthentic. And the problem with that is we as humans, if we see something where there's like a cognitive dissonance in what we expect to see and what's actually happening, at an unconscious level, we distrust that. We don't like it, it makes us uncomfortable, and then we trust less. So everything you do in your words, so on your website, in any newsletters, any social media, make sure that everything's on message. So first of all, you have to know what those messages are, and then you have to stick to them. Consistent tone of voice. You don't want someone to have a completely different experience on Facebook as on your website. Obviously, social media, there are different channels, different kind of expectations, but if on Facebook you're a really fun company and then they go to your website and it's a really boring website, then they're going to be like, what's up here? In your visuals, make sure that across everything, it's united. Too often you see a beautifully designed website and then somebody's gone crazy with Canva on their social media and it just looks a mess. Make sure that, again, it's the cognitive dissonance. And most importantly, in your actions, in what you do. Brand work can often just get stuck with marketing, and people think that it's just like a fun marketing tool and it's a bit fluffy. But what it is, it's the articulation of your identity. And so if your receptionist is snarky but your brand values are all about being open and welcoming, compassionate, and she's really rude, she's not on brand, your customer's going to have a bad experience and they're not going to forget it and probably leave you a bad Google review. So it's not just marketing's role or sort of whichever team, the sales team's role, it's everybody's role to ensure that the brand is consistently communicated. And it's much easier to do that and build and maintain trust so that you have that bank of trust that you've built. So when something does go wrong, you can kind of fall back on it if you know what you stand for. I'm going to take you through a quick case study. It's actually a client of mine. She's an elder law attorney. And I was going to play a video. Technically, it's too hard. So, just a little bit of background on Kate and why she practices elder law. And she's a joy to work with because she is effortlessly authentic. She encapsulates the brand. She works with older people to help them, to help protect their legacies. And so she does estate plans, guardianships, and conservatorships. She does estate administration and all that. And it's a vocation to her. She's also a hospice chaplain. She actually dropped out of school when she was 16 to care for her dying mother. After which she went to college. She's got a law degree. She also did a master's in divinity. Like, it's her whole life is about this cause. So when putting together her brand, we have various parts that I kind of wanted to pick out for her for you today. This is our homepage of our website. As this is kind of the first time that people often encounter us, and then this is various bits of marketing activity that I want to show you how they all play together. So on the website, we have our mission statement front and center, and it's giving families peace of mind by protecting their legacy. So that is what we're trying to do every day. And we also have her values on there: integrity, advocacy, service, compassion. And so that's what she says, how she's going to behave. Her and her team are expected to behave every day. So those are important elements. The other thing I wanted to pick out kind of visually, does anybody recognize this mountain? Yes. And that is because Kate comes from Crested Butte. So when she designed her logo originally, Rocky Mountain, and loads of things are Rocky Mountain in Colorado, obviously, but this is actually also genuinely important to her and chose that profile for her logo. So when we did the website, we thought that would be a really nice thing. And also, we did not want to go anywhere near scales of justice, people holding hands, and like smiling old people. So for our visual brand, there is a lot of cheesy stuff out there. So those are just some elements I wanted to call out. So when it comes to how that plays out everywhere else, here we have a testimonial, which is a lovely testimonial because it's a great piece of marketing collateral. Love a testimonial. But also it actually plays back some of her values in that she's with them the whole time, advocating for them, handle the care. I'll read it to you actually. Very kind, knowledgeable, caring individuals. Kate has handled our care with the most care, with the most care and respect. I do not feel alone anymore in my situation. Rocky Mountain Elder Law has walked me every step of the way. I would highly recommend them. So it's kind of, again, in line with the values. When it comes to what we talk about and everything she does, it's protecting their legacy. It's all about protection. So when we use those words in our messaging, this is a case study about a guardianship and conservatorship. So we choose to reflect kind of some of that base branding. Equally up here, this is a LinkedIn article related to this case study. We use mountains in the graphics quite a lot because it helps us stand out from the rest of the lawyers and also is our brand. And then here, just kind of an example of a fun social media post, but it's very thought through because it's National Parents' Day. We're all about families. We give families peace of mind. So here's a family. It's also kind of in terms of the graphics we use. We try not to have them too cheesy. It's all about respect and kind of compassion. So that's just a few ways that we try to build consistency, so that when somebody first encountered us through Facebook, through LinkedIn, through through the YouTube channel that we have or wherever, when they see those things first and then they get here, they're not surprised. It all ties together. So I'm done. So now that was the
now on to the bad news.
Yes. Good news, bad news.
Yes.
That was the good news. This is the bad news.
Yes. Hopefully in your business it's better than the 80-20 rule. Hopefully it's like 95% good news, proactive, telling your story, but when the thunderstorm rolls through, you got to be prepared. So that's what I'm here to talk about, is being in a position to address the thunderstorm and make sure that you're managing things while the thunderstorm is taking place, and that you come out in even a stronger place, because every crisis is a threat, but also is an opportunity on the other end to live your values, to implement fixes that could prevent the situation from happening again, and then to talk about that and to earn trust back. So I think the most practical thing I can say to you guys is mostly business owners, business leaders. Who has their own business here? Almost everyone. Is every single quarter, as you think about your quarterly results or quarterly plan or look ahead, spend 3 hours, a half a day before lunch on a Friday with your team, thinking through risks, negative headlines that could hit, and things that, keep you up at night as a manager. Because a big public company would have 10 pages and it's 10K, where they've had lawyers and auditors and risk management people do this whole, set of audits and surveys and all this stuff. But you as business leaders, the risks inherent in your business, and A, what you can do now to mitigate them, and B, for things that could not be within your control, a natural disaster, a pandemic, these things, you can have a plan in place in advance to address them. So, this quarter, spend 3 hours with your team envisioning the worst case scenarios, and then you can map them very conversationally, qualitatively, against how likely each of these things are to happen. If you have a brick and mortar building, we don't have a lot of earthquakes here in Colorado, but we do have wildfires and any number of other disasters. So, what are the closest in real life risks that could affect your business and affect your ability to serve your customers on any given day? And how severe are those? Some of these incidents, if you either co-manufacture or have any kind of manufacturing facility, workplace safety is a huge one. If you have a business, a restaurant or a business that, you're engaging with the community, you could have a boycott or a protest, and it could all be happening online. And that is an opportunity to manage that and to be engaged in that conversation and talk about your values. And if something went wrong, to acknowledge it and talk to your audience about what you're going to do to make sure that never happens again. Yes. Sorry. Hello, our lovely virtual audience. Sorry about that. All right. So all of you as business leaders, you know how important it is to designate roles and responsibilities, and a crisis plan is no different. You in your team, both in your own, office and close-in team, and resources outside your company that you tap for legal advice, for communication advice, for technical input. Talk to your team about those risks that you've identified, because you can pick the top three. Top three are very practical. And if, number 10 happens, elements of the top three, the plan that you put in place for the top three will apply. Every situation's different. You're never going to just go by the book and go by the checklist. But having that checklist in place gives you a huge head start, because time is of the essence when you're responding to something. These days, in my early days of my career, we used to have 24 hours to put a statement out to the media. That's what our plan was based on, that the news cycle is 24 hours long. Now you literally have less than 24 minutes. It is sped up. I was doing this in the 90s, and that was the cardinal rule. When Tylenol had what did they call it? Everyone remember that, when the cyanide laced Tylenol capsules? They did not put a statement out for 24 hours about, what happened. And that was considered a best practice in those days. But now, I mean, you're just running against the clock. So you have to have a plan in place. And then the best way to both socialize that plan with your own team and to help your team actually come together in a team building sense and think through values and think through how those values might be put to the test on a significant crisis or a rainy day, or just a investigative reporter that's nosing around in your business that is going to have a heyday when he or she figures out something going on behind the scenes. Could be with a supplier, could be anything out there. You want to test that plan through a drill. Like what I'll do with clients is create, in this case, this was a fake news story about a food safety incident that was, listeria contaminated milk. And we had, in this case, it was for the Oregon Dairy Association. We did like fake newscasts to help the whole employee team. It was just a team of like 20 employees of this dairy council enact, okay, what would happen if the kids at school who drink milk every day as part of the National School Lunch Program, A, can't get that milk because there's been a major recall, and B, you have sick kids that are that have been loyal milk drinkers for all this time, and now all of a sudden milk is making kids sick. Well, the dairy industry and the dietitians that help promote milk as a wholesome part of the school meal, that is considered a crisis, absolutely. And you have all those factors. So what we do in the dairy industry is actually role play these crises so that our teams understand, A, the real risks. We always have a technical expert in microbiology and pathogens and, talk about the real sources of the pathogens and how it travels through the food supply chain. And that's like an educational component. Well, what happens if all the quality control processes, that are in place, there's still an element of risk, something could get through from a pathogen perspective. And all of a sudden you have a bunch of sick kids, and these really, people who have dedicated their careers to promoting the dairy industry feel authentically, that is something that we need to address and help the public health authorities get that product off the shelves, and then help over time, once the product's reintroduced, rebuild the brand and reintroduce the product. That's kind of the business aspects of it, is that you're trying to get back to regular business just as quickly as possible. And from a media and social media perspective, there's lots of best practices and research and ways that we can help in any given situation as media relations types, help you present yourself, your company, your values with your best foot forward, even when something went wrong, because you've been building your brand, what your values are, and there's been an infraction, a compromise, a supplier issue. You address it and talk about what you're doing. So the next slide, to make sure it never happens again. That one right here. And then you can move on with your audience, go, reintroduce your service, your product, go back to the market, and be sometimes in a stronger position for it. The general kind of model, this one was built for dairy farmers, so you'll see dairy front and center in it. But no matter what the situation is, like how Georgina was talking about, you have to know your audience. You're speaking to that audience and you're expressing concern and empathy for anyone who is harmed in the situation. Some situations are like just a supply chain disruption, nobody's harmed. But when you think about like infant formula, it actually, even though there was a huge, a lot of supply chain issues related to COVID around the same time, infant formula had major supply disruptions, and you had mothers that couldn't feed their infants, because it's not always just a convenience thing with infant formula. It's sometimes, a health thing for the mother or the baby. So you express empathy for the people affected by the situation at hand. I mean, even if it's a natural disaster, it's an act that is not within anybody's control, you still express empathy and concern for the people affected. You outline, if it is something that's within your control, you outline, steps that you as a company and as a supply chain are taking to ensure that situation is prevented in the future. Half the time it is a natural disaster, or it's a workplace violence incident, something you're not, your attorneys will tell you, don't apologize. But you can acknowledge the situation, talk about what the company is doing to look into it, and talk about what steps the company or the business is going to take to make sure that the public is protected in a greater fashion in the future. And then over time, sometimes this is within your day one response. A lot of times this more is a kind of drip type of communication that you're building over time. And you're talking about the bigger picture in terms of your values. I mean, for a farm and a agriculture entity, you're talking about the care for the cows, you're talking about food safety, you're talking about environmental considerations and making sure, say, if it's like, a huge manure spill that ends up contaminating public like waterways, you're talking about your commitment to environmental protection in the big picture and how this incident was a compromise. So let's talk about early warning signs for a minute. One of the things that you as business people can do with the first 10 minutes of your day, you probably scan ahead news headlines. There's some really great electronic tools. It's really important for someone on your team to actually be accountable for reading the news. I know that, probably a lot of us do it on our phones over the course of the day. Someone on your team should have keywords in whatever system. Google's free. There's tons of more sophisticated systems. You could spend your whole day, sorting through this, but you can get your top local news channels, top trade media type of news channels, and top, social media feeds that are tracking things, and have someone accountable for looking at that when they wake up every day or when they get to the, place of business every day, because it's easy to miss things. We're all like in information overload. And a lot of times in your community and in your, course of business, there are early warning signals, and you can see what's happening either to your competition or to another market with a similar business model or some other such thing. And then you update your crisis plan to address it. Or, just by virtue sometimes of the Denver Post calling that something's burbling up. And then you also go, the internet makes it easy and hard. I mean, that's, again, another whole lesson on monitoring. But somebody within your business or you needs to be like in a place where every day you have a discipline to doing this. And then you can start, to see trends. A lot of it is intuitive and some of it can be programmed into your electronic stuff. But a lot of it is just intuition and common sense as a business person. But if you're not watching, then you could be late to the game in terms of addressing something on social media, etc. Yeah, absolutely.
And it also means that the person who's in charge of your social media feeds needs to let you know if there's a negative Facebook comment, if somebody's engaged with a post in a negative way, those negative Google reviews, anything like that, that all needs to be addressed, because it might just be a one-off, but it might be a symptom of something larger as well.
Mm-hmm. So let's pause here, because this is like the last slide, and the case study is about a big, couple hundred people affected by the listeria outbreak. So probably not exactly your business models. So we can talk through that, but I'd rather answer questions for either Georgina or I in our last few minutes. So what's on your mind? What questions has this prompted? Do we have any questions?
Nothing on the chat or on the Google right now.
Okay, good. Conversation points, questions. Or you want to hear about how Bluebell really messed up their response to 300 people being sick from listeria? A lot of them were in the hospital and being fed ice cream, and then ice cream made them sicker in the hospital.
Oh.
It was in 2015, so a little bit of an outdated case study, but I mean, the company did everything wrong. They first denied it. Then they shut down like one line in one plant, and it ended up their plant infrastructure was so old, and they were doing so many things to like just save money and reuse things that by the time the FDA and the CDC finished investigating, I mean, the president of this company went to jail. Now, if you're in the Southeast, they actually brought people back to their brand in a way that, for me as a communicator, I found, pretty shocking that people still couldn't wait to get their Bluebell ice cream back on the shelf. But that's their brand building. And that's why, it's just an interesting kind of case study to debate, because they did not follow any of the communication best practices. They did, of course, lose sales over the year that they were grappling with FDA investigations and plant shutdowns and all these things. But the brand came back because people love the taste. People in the Southeast grew up with this kind of ice cream, and they know their customer, and they know that, people enjoy the product. So from a, technical food science, food safety standpoint, they did everything wrong. From a communication standpoint, they did everything wrong. But over time, I mean, they lost at least a year of sales. Over time, they came back both from a consumer perspective and a sales perspective. So you can't, no matter how much you mess up in a business, there's still hope.